Hi, thank you for joining us. We are getting ready to take you on a tour of the Garret Antique Shop, a Victorian home built in 1895, which we are getting ready to sell at online auction. We've been selling items from the Garret Antique Shop since June of 2024. This has been the largest single project we've ever taken on as a company, having completed somewhere around 35 auctions to date, with probably at least 10 more to go, possibly 12. This was a very, very large estate, and the home is a very unique home. Um, Please make sure you join us for our open house on Halloween Day from 1 to 6, where we'll be taking you on tours of the home. We'll have some Halloween treats for the kids, and we have free beer and wine from 3 to 6. Thank you for taking the time to look at the video and see what's coming, and we hope to see you on Halloween. All right, so here we are today at the Garret, and we're going to begin our tour of the house. Um, this is the main entry on Kirkwood Avenue, and this was built facing Kirkwood, so this is the front of the Garret uh, home. If you take note as we go in, there's a plaque here showing that this was the Batman house built in 1895, referred to as eclectic Victorian design. We're going to talk more about the outside, but let's go in and take a look at this beautiful home. Here we are in the main entryway. This is what you would see when you came to visit at this home or when you came to shop at the Garret Antiques. When we started this project, we had to work for a couple of days clearing this area out because we couldn't get the doors all the way open and we couldn't actually move anything around because it was so full. This was completely filled with display cabinets. The walls were covered. There was light fixtures everywhere. And this was the original Garret Antique Shop. So we are on the first level of the Garret House. We're standing in the front room, which looks out on Kirkwood Avenue. Behind the photographer here is the turret on the west side, again with its own radiator, and there's another matching turret on the other side. The home was designed in 1895 to face Kirkwood, so this would have been the front of the house. And this was the main shop for the Garrets. One of the things that's really unique about the Garret, as I've already said about the woodwork, and by the way, please note that we have yet a different carving here and a different carving in these other rooms. But this is one of the original fireplaces that was built in 1895. This has the original tile work, the original iron cover, and this would have been the way it would have looked when the home was new. The history is a little blurred after the initial build until a little later in the 20th century when the home became some different things. We know it was a funeral home, but we really don't know what happened to it between the original build and its becoming a funeral home. We don't believe, as we understand it, that the Batman family actually lived in the house all that long after the build. We don't know that history clearly. Um, this was also another room that was used for the original shop. And when they bought the house in the 1970s, 1974, there was literally no access to this basement. Um, I'm not sure where the access was. I'm sure that there had to be a way to get down there to manage maintenance of the boiler and things. But Mr. Garret actually cut this opening and put this stairway in so that he would have access here from the shop. We'll go down into the basement a little later, but this was a room that we would assume was part of the main living areas of the house on the main floor. We're going to go into the back side of the great stairwell. And this has a lot of really nice craftsmanship here. The lighting's not great, but there's a lot of nice woodwork that was done here around this stairway. And behind our photographer is the second half bath on this level. And then you walk through this little sort of secret corridor and it takes you back into the kitchen. But before we go back there, let's go back out here and let's take a look at this grand entry. This is where you came into the home. You've got the stairway going up, and then you've got basically living spaces on each side of the grand hallway. When you walk into this area, this is an area that was always referred to by the Garret family as the parlor. And this was one of the areas that was private. So this area was completely filled with art and antiques that were in the private collections of the Garret family. Again, in this room, we have another piece of furniture that is going to be in that auction. And this is a really unique piece. You hear of breakdown wardrobes and different types of furniture that breaks down into components. But this piece is actually a breakdown display cabinet. And this was in the master suite. And believe it or not, this piece was actually stacked on top of another piece. That's how crammed some of the furnishings were in these massive collections that the Garrets had acquired. But here you have another matching turret. And again, we're facing Kirkwood Avenue. When we leave the parlor, oh, and before I forget, here is the second fireplace. And again, original tile, original woodwork, original ironwork. Just a spectacular example of Victorian, an 1895 Victorian home. A beautiful, beautiful piece with a high level of craftsmanship in its original build. And I may be wrong, but I believe this is probably the original finish on this fireplace. When we come through into this room, this was a room that was referred to as the dining room. That was Garret's use. Can I say that's what it was built for? We're not sure. But ironically, on the back side in this room, we have a third fireplace in the original condition as it was built. And if you take note of these fireplaces, they're all a little bit different with a little bit different ironwork, a little bit different tile. Everything's held up pretty well. There's a little bit of damage on the tile on this one, on the base, on the hearth there in front of the fireplace. This is a doorway that goes out into the hallway. And here again is another example of a completely different rosette block in these corner blocks on these door openings. This is a room that the Garrets used as sort of their meeting space and living space. I knew the Garrets for many years before Mr. Garret passed, and I would say they spent a great majority of their time in this room, this dining room area, and where we're headed now, which is the kitchen. This area isn't completely cleaned out. This is one of the last areas that we're working on to get ready for our open house here on Friday. But this cabinet will be sold in the auction. This is actually a cabinet that they bought and brought in. This was the pantry. And in here in the pantry, this was a really unique area that was large and would have housed all their storage for food. This window that's here, this would have been the pay window for the Union Hall. And this door that's here is reinforced with iron strappings. So we think this was a safe room when it was owned by the Union. And they modified this room so that it would be secure and people couldn't easily get into it because, of course, everybody knew this is where they kept all the money. The lower version on the main level, by the way, this old kitchen farm sink, and let me see if there's a light here. There we go. This old white farm sink was the sink that the Garrets actually installed. This sink was put in by them, and this was their primary kitchen area. This area back here is that add-on space. There's a small piece here that's not part of the original build, and this is that area. We're not sure. This may have been quarters for help that worked at the house, staff, but there is an exterior entrance to this room. And in this room, you'll note there are some furniture pieces here that also will be in that auction. One of the things that there was a lot of in this house were half doors. And I suspect that those half doors were installed later. I don't think those were part of the original build. Perhaps when it was part of the union shop, they may have done that as these rooms may have been used for specific trades. So that door actually is goes here, and we just have it down because moving things in and out here are tough with doors. If you'll follow me, we're going to go ahead and we're going to head upstairs, and we're going to look at the second level of this fabulous house. This is the original staircase. Again, I think there may be a missing finial on the top of this post, although this one actually may be original and not removed. But the casework and the woodwork that went into this, these original spindles, most are in place. I think there may be a few missing over the years that got knocked out or lost, but that is the original staircase that came in the house. Obviously, this tile or this vinyl work is more contemporary. Let's go upstairs and start the tour up there. So here we are on the second floor of the Garret, and we don't know what this room was intended to be in the original build in 1895, but I suspect this was either a ballroom type area or what might be referred to as a great room. It's a large open space, and it's beamed so that it kind of wraps around into that area, leaving the bedrooms back in the back as separate rooms. But this is the most light in the entire house that you get from windows. They really put a lot of windows in this area, making me think this was an important room in the house when it was built in 1895. One of the things I wanted to point out about this house is this house has a boiler that the Garrets replaced actually in just the last few years. But almost every room has at least one or more of these radiators. And I'm not sure if these are the original radiators that were put in 1895, but these are very, very old. They certainly are old enough that they could be. And I'm sure some of the radiators are the originals. This particular turret has these window seats with storage, which I think are original to the house. I don't think these were an addition put in by the Garrets. And one of the things that I wanted to point out about this house is all of this woodwork and trim, all the casework in the house is the original 1895 casework. I think the only part of that I can't be sure of is this wainscot wall that's around this room. That may be the only trim in the house that I've noticed that's been painted. All the rest of the woodwork actually has the original 1895 finish on it and has never been painted. So in a restoration, it would be assumed and hoped that all of this would stay original and not change. As you walk through this space, you'll also notice there's a little area back here that may have originally been a serving area, and perhaps if they were having an event, they might have served out of this area. This room back in the back is actually the only part of the structure that was built later. And we're not exactly sure when or why that piece was put on, but on the first and second stories, there's this small addition on this back wing. So the original house actually stopped at that doorway, and this would have been the original build. And then if you come this way on the second level, you come into this main stairway, which is the original stairwell that was put in. Now, based on what I see here, there may have been some sort of a decorative piece here that's long since gone. But again, this is all the original trim and woodwork, the original spindles and original fretwork that was done in 1895. If you come this way, you'll notice on this door the words plumbers and steam fitters. So before the Garrets bought the house in 1974, it was owned by the local union hall here in Monroe County. And this particular room apparently would have been the room that plumbers and steam fitters may have went into for whatever reason for their particular trade. This was used as a bedroom by the Garrets, And by the way, all this lighting that you see in the house is all being sold in the last auction of items here on site. But I wanted to point out, here's another radiator, and this one has a little more decorative iron in it, and it's a little bit more of a physically beautiful piece of ironwork compared to the radiator in the other room. This is facing Madison Avenue. The house sits here on the corner of Kirkwood and Madison in Bloomington, Indiana. And this was a bedroom that the Garrets used as a guest bedroom. Here we have a closet that walks through with doors on each side into what was used by the Garret family as the master bedroom. And a couple of light fixtures here, again, are going to be sold as part of that auction of the final things from the house. But if you come back into this room, you can see the original attic access, and this had a window in it, so you'd have better access if you needed to get something into the attic. That is an opening that we think was original to the house. It sure looks like it based on the trim. One of the interesting things about this trim is these little rosette blocks at the top corners of these doorways is a little bit different in different areas of the house. And we think they probably had a mill set up here in 1895 with carpenters actually making this trim on site. And we think that they were carving those rosettes out individually for different areas of the house. If you notice, the rosettes here are one design, and this piece has a different rosette, and we're not quite sure why. We aren't sure that this isn't something that was originally an exterior window that the Garrets modified, and it was changed whenever this extra space was built on later after the original build. You might notice the electric in this house has been redone to some degree, probably by the AFL-CIO just to provide more outlets. I suspect at one point this was some sort of an office for them and may have had multiple parties in it. And I think they probably put this electrical conduit above the trim here in this room. One of the things that's interesting about this second floor is it actually houses the only full bathroom in the house. And I'll let you take a quick, brief look, but you can see bathroom facilities weren't something they seemed to be too worried about in 1895 like we would be today. That is the only bathroom with a stand-up shower, and the bathroom downstairs is a little half bath, and that is the only bath facilities in the house. When this was an antique shop, everything beyond the door here was private family area, and beyond here in this bedroom, this was the main open shop area on the second floor. The attic was never open to the public. That space was always private space. And I'm going to show you guys, if you'll come through, there's a doorway here that takes us up into the attic. And now I'm going to take you up into the attic space. So here we are at the Garret in the attic, which I think is one of the best spaces in the house. You know, when you think of an attic, you think of a place you crawl up in a hole and you hit your head when you walk around. But this is a complete walk-around space with access to both of the turrets, which are really, really cool spots in this particular level. But this is the first time in probably 45 years that this attic's been empty. And it's really incredible what the space looks like now that we don't have it full of the Garret's many collections. We hope you all can get here on Halloween for our open house so you can come up here yourselves and enjoy this great space. This space would be fabulous to finish and actually use as a third floor, and structurally it is more than adequately built to do that. Hey, we're here today inside the third story level or attic space of the Garret house in the actual turret or tower that you see from the street, extending up almost 4 stories. Interestingly, you've got this great brick architecture with these arches for support as you come into this, and these giant beams under these windows, and here as you cross in, all part of the structural integrity of this great old building. What's really kind of cool, Mr. Garrett put in a little drop ceiling up here, but these actually extend up probably another 20 feet or so, literally on, if you were looking in traditional heights, on the 4th floor to the top of the turrets. And Mr. Garrett had put a fire ladder in here to get up there. And believe it or not, when we cleaned this house out, it was so full that he had stashed quite a few things up in the tops of the turrets. But this is great space, and it looks out on Kirkwood Avenue here in Bloomington, Indiana. If you are familiar with Bloomington, this is one of our main thoroughfares. And of course, we're just a couple of blocks from the courthouse square here. So this is really a near downtown property. Thanks for joining us here in the turrets today. Okay, now we're going to go down to the basement. We're still working down here, so there's a little bit of messies, but bear with us. We're almost done. This was an area that looks like at some point in time they thought it might be a bathroom. I don't think it was ever a bathroom, but the fixtures are still here. This area goes into the main basement. So when we started the project, there was just a little path through this area. It was completely full, wall to wall, ceiling to floor, full. But one of the things that we discovered as we were doing the work down here and could actually see the area is at some point there was a major restoration done of this foundation on the house. You know, if you look at the house outside, there are literally probably tens to hundreds of tons of stone in this structure, stone and brick. And we think that when this was owned by the Union Hall, because they had access to tradespeople that could do this work, we think they put up these reinforcing concrete block walls in the entire perimeter of the basement. And they probably re-poured the floors because there's a step up from the original basement here, and we think this floor was brought up and re-poured. So anyway, they also put in this main beam wall, which would be the main beam under the house, and they reinforced the foundation underneath the main fireplaces, where we saw the 2 back-to-back fireplaces in the upstairs. This is the area where you actually would clean the ash out from the fireplaces. It would drop down to here. But as you can see, this has all been redone with concrete block. And this is actually, you probably notice over there, this is actually the foundation for the turrets on each side. So again, standing here in the basement, we're facing Kirkwood. And you can see that the basement was never really finished, but it has been restored structurally. This area is really messy because we're cleaning out the last tool room here in this area. You know, you never know what you're going to find. These are really fantastic early duck decoys. And though the paint's just about wore off, they still have the name, the Elliston decoy, with the lead weight on the bottom, so they'd stay upright and positioned. Here's an old coffee tin from the Fishback Company, steel cut, roasted coffee, Indianapolis, Indiana. You know, there's just so many fun things. Here's an old Polk dairy box. Part of what was really cool about this area was this was Dennis's primary rock shop. This was an area that he opened up to the public on weekends. When we came in, this was completely filled with display cabinets full of rocks. But if you look at these walls, you'll note this old structural architectural terracotta. And Dennis actually went and salvaged all of this terracotta from a building that was being torn down in Indianapolis. He went up and literally drug it out of the trash and saved it and brought it down here. And he created this area, calling it the Grotto, using all of this original terracotta from this building in Indianapolis. So this is really interesting space. But if you'll zoom over to that wall, you'll note that there you can actually see the original brick that goes all the way back to the structure, and you can see some of the original limestone over here. So that little area where the boiler is the only part of the basement where you can actually still see the original limestone block and brick as it would have been when the house was built in 1895. Everything else in this area has been reinforced. And again, if you notice the step up, that's because they re-poured these floors. Right now, we're cleaning out the last area, which is this tool room. And we probably will be finishing that next week. And then the basement here, the last frontier, will be completely done. Again, I reiterate, we started this project in June of 2024. It is now October of 2025. So we've worked on this house now for almost a year and a half to get it to this point where we're nearly finished with the clean out. When the Garretts moved in, there was no outside access from the basement. So that is one thing that Dennis did do. Dennis put this exterior door in. So there was a walkout that went outside. So everything didn't have to come down the stairs because Dennis liked to collect stuff. And it made it easier for him to bring more stuff in. So this is the door that comes out of the grotto from the basement. And this is the area that Mr. Garret put in because there was no access here. And this takes us out, and we'll begin our look at the outside of this great building. We'll start around here in the back. And as you can see, when you come to the back of the home, it's very clear that there's this addition that was put on later. But from there, this away, this is all the original 1895 house. We believe that all of this woodwork, everything that you see, the stone columns, all the limestone work, this was all done in 1895. This is the back entrance to the house. So this is the door that goes into the kitchen, if you remember that part of the tour. And as we walk around the house, you can see we begin to come into view of the turrets on the front. This is the area that we referred to as the dining room. Above it is the guest bedroom on the second level. And that window at the top is one of the windows in the attic. When you come around in this house and you take a look at the turrets and you look at the size of the limestone and you look at the size of the blocks and the ledge work and the design work, this sign, if you can see the back of it, it says the AFL Temple. And this was the sign for the Union Hall. It was called the Temple. I think the Garret family refers to the house as the Temple. Here, you've got this glorious front porch with the limestone columns and bases, the beautiful work on the top of the columns. And you can really get a great view of the front of the house. The building did originally have a slate roof. Mrs. Garret changed everything to a traditional roof. I just can't imagine in 1895 what it was like to move these massive pieces of limestone in place. And even more interesting is how well they've aged over 130 years. Here we are in 2025, 130 years later. And, you know, with some minor exception, this house is very stable and has aged very, very well. Here we see the last turret. And again, as you wrap around the house, you can see the section that was built and installed later. based on the foundation under that part of the house, later was probably in the early 20th century. That's not something that was done in 1970. So it's been there a long time. It was there when the Garretts bought the house, but we're not sure when that addition was put on. That concludes our tour. Thank you.